Taehyung has always carried a certain kind of silence around him, the type that feels intentional, cinematic, and heavy with stories he never tells. Fans know the idol persona, the stage genius, the soulful baritone voice, the poetic artist who could make an arena feel intimate. But very few have ever seen the man who exists in the quiet moments, when no spotlight is aimed at his face. The world would soon learn that Taehyung was capable of disappearing not because he wanted attention, but because he wanted none of it. It started on an icy December night in Seoul, the kind of cold that crept into your lungs if you breathed too deeply. The city shimmered with Christmas decorations and the usual nightlife haze, but Taehyung's apartment was dim, almost monastic. No music played, no stylist hovered, no manager texted reminders, just the sound of a zipper closing as he packed a black duffel bag, the metal teeth snapping together like a decision being sealed. He wore an oversized coat, a beanie pulled low, and a mask that hid everything except the posture of someone whose body had memorized how to avoid being recognized. When the elevator doors shut, he didn't look back. That was the first sign something was different. Incheon International Airport was alive in a way only airports can be, chaotic, emotional, oblivious. Families hugged too long, businessmen speedwalked like their shoes were late, toddlers melted down like candles, the air smelled like expensive perfume, bread, and jet fuel. But Taehyung walked through it unnoticed. Later, a fan would post a blurry photo online claiming they saw him there, but even the photo looked unsure of itself. He didn't rush. He didn't sweat. He simply existed between luggage carts and duty-free stores like a man who had practiced invisibility in the mirror for years. Then came the voice from behind him. "You think you can just disappear like that?" The voice was sharp, accusing, familiar enough to spark confusion but not recognition. Taehyung turned slowly, breath visible in the terminal air, eyes calm like a lake that knows it's deep. "Watch me," he said. No smirk, no theatrics, just wait. The person behind him cursed under their breath, muttering that idols always thought rebellion made them free. But Taehyung was already walking away before the sentence fully formed. The next 27 hours were logistics masked as fate. There were no official flight logs showing his departure, no paparazzi shots of him boarding, no member selfies waving goodbye. Nothing, because his ticket wasn't commercial, his exit wasn't public, his name didn't even show up on the manifest. He flew via a chartered jet that only existed in private records, landing in a remote airfield in Northern California, far from press, fans, agencies, expectations, far even from the people he once called brothers on stage. This wasn't a scandal yet. This was strategy. Mendocino greeted him with fog and cliffs and the kind of ocean wind that felt like a secret keeper. The airfield was empty. No purple ocean of army light sticks. No interviews. No assistants. Just a driver who didn't speak a single word handing him a burner phone and a folded note written in a language that was neither Korean nor English. But Taehyung understood. He always understood the unsaid. That was his gift and his curse. The house waiting for him sat on a cliff's edge, furnished sparsely like a place not meant for permanence. Clean lines. Cold minimalism. The type of home someone uses when they don't plan to stay long but need walls thick enough to hide their breathing. Inside a bedroom drawer lay a set of keys, a small vial glowing blue under dim light, and a single gallery ticket for a show happening in 5 nights. The artist's name was crossed out with black ink, but Taehyung didn't need to read it. He already knew who it was, someone from a chapter he had once sealed shut. A notification buzzed on the burner phone. One vibration. No name, just a message. "We know where you are, and we know why you left. Stop running." He read it, expression unreadable. Then he walked to the fireplace and dropped the phone into it, lighting a match without hesitation. The flames caught quickly like the truth always did when Taehyung finally decided to touch it. But disappearing from a country and disappearing from a narrative are different wars. And America was only the setting. The real story wasn't where he flew to, it was why the world was shaken when they found out where he had been standing, who he had been avoiding, what silence he had been carrying, and how deep the secret roots went beneath the music industry that built legends out of compliant stardust. The next hour of the story would peel back the psychology of a man who didn't just run from fame, but from the machinery that turned humans into exportable myths. And the world was about to learn that Taehyung disappearing wasn't the shock. The shock was what he was ready to reveal once he stopped being invisible. The internet moves faster than airports, faster than investigations, faster even than grief. And by the time Taehyung had burned that burner phone, speculation had already started breeding like wildfire. The first theory was predictable. He was exhausted, overworked, taking a break from public life. But the second wave of theories carried teeth. Disappearing idols were one thing, disappearing legends were another. And Taehyung had built his entire persona on being present without ever fully being known. That made his absence feel suspicious, calculated, almost threatening. The world didn't know yet that he had left. They only knew that he wasn't where he was supposed to be. His scheduled interview for a US magazine never happened. The stylist team waiting to prepare him for a New Year broadcast received nothing but silence. No cancellation notice, no running late, no poetic Instagram apology post. Silence. The kind of silence that sounds like guilt even when guilt isn't the reason. Meanwhile, the house on the Mendocino cliffs was colder at night than Taehyung expected. The fog outside the windows swallowed the coastline whole, like it was helping him disappear further. But Taehyung didn't sleep. He paced. Idols rehearse choreography. Taehyung rehearsed exits. He moved through the empty living room, boots clicking against hardwood like a clock ticking down to something inevitable, running simulations in his head. If someone traced the first footage, if someone leaked the second angle, if someone found the person behind the crossed-out gallery ticket, if someone connected the dots between Tokyo, a breakdown, and a disappearance that never made the news, the world wouldn't just be shocked. They would be divided. And division was louder than truth. His laptop sat open on the kitchen island, not connected to the company's servers, not logged into any Korean accounts, not tied to BTS or HYBE or Seoul or America officially. Just a blank browser window and a search bar blinking at him like an invitation. He typed one word, gallery, then another, mysterious artist California portrait crossed out. He deleted it instantly. He didn't need to see what the world didn't know. He needed to see what he did. The gallery ticket was real. The crossed-out name was deliberate. The vial in the drawer was symbolic, a reminder or maybe a warning, depending on how the next 5 nights unfolded. But what haunted him was America. It was Tokyo. The last time he vanished from a narrative without choosing it first. Back then in 2019, during the BTS Japan tour, Taehyung had stepped out onto a Tokyo hotel balcony at 3 a.m., trembling not from cold but from overstimulation. The city was neon, overwhelming, buzzing like a hive of expectation. Someone had asked him backstage, "What happens if you stop performing?" He didn't answer, but the thought never left. That was the moment he began practicing silence as a survival mechanism. And now, 6 years later, he was doing it again. Not from panic, from agency. But agency comes with consequences, and Taehyung had learned long ago that consequences never arrive cleanly. They arrive mid-conversation, mid-airport, mid-trending hashtag, mid-identity crisis. And right now, the hashtag was forming without him. "We know where you are, and we know why you left." That message had been designed to corner him, but Taehyung had already memorized what being cornered felt like. He knew the difference between a threat and a trigger. Threats make idols run. Triggers make Taehyung calculate. Another vibration. This time from the laptop notification system, not the phone. A new upload from an anonymous fan live streaming outside a California gallery. He clicked it once, slow, deliberate. The stream showed nothing special at first. Coastal modern art, dim red lighting, minimalist frames, social elites sipping wine. But then a single painting behind velvet rope, half covered by shadows. Taehyung's face from 2021. A portrait that looked too honest to be official merchandise, too raw to be PR approved, too intimate to be painted by someone who didn't know the subject's nightmares. The chat exploded under the live stream. Is that Taehyung? Why is his face here? Why is the artist name blacked out? Who painted this? Why does this feel like a goodbye? Is he even in America? Why would he fly here secretly? Is BTS okay? Is he okay? Who else is hiding in that gallery? He exhaled. The world was beginning to recognize the unsaid. He closed the laptop screen gently like someone sealing evidence in a psychological archive. He didn't look at the comments. He didn't need the noise. He already had the signal. Someone was baiting the world into finding him before he chose to speak. That meant the narrative war had begun. And narrative wars are won by whoever controls the first recognizable silence. He opened the back door again. The ocean wind slapped his face like consequence itself. This time, the fog didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like a witness. And Taehyung whispered to the dark American night, not for anyone else to hear, but for the story that was already writing itself around his name, you can't spin someone who doesn't give you the footage first. The next morning didn't bring relief, only amplification. When an idol disappears, the world invents stories. When Taehyung disappears, the world interrogates silence itself. By sunrise in Santa Fe, his name was no longer a question. It was a fever. The gallery portrait had become the gravitational center of a narrative storm no PR team could have drafted, no agency statement could have softened. Fans weren't just curious. They were emotionally invested in the idea that Taehyung had chosen mystery over messaging, that he had stepped off the official map for reasons deeper than exhaustion, reasons psychological, seismic, dangerous to the machinery that built global idols out of curated fragments. Ray had crossed out her own name on the ticket because she never needed credit. She needed leverage. Taehyung knew artists like that, the ones who painted truth as a trap, not a tribute. The portrait was real enough to bruise, intimate enough to incriminate, and silent enough to let the world narrate its own fear around it. That was the first move. The second move was about to be his. He stood by the window again, coffee untouched, thoughts loud enough to drown the desert quiet. He could almost hear the newsroom voices writing speculative scripts in their heads. He imagined the headlines before they were written. Taehyung ran, Taehyung broke, Taehyung betrayed the system, Taehyung left BTS, Taehyung chose isolation, Taehyung is preparing to expose something. The final headline was the only one that mattered, because it was true, not as accusation but as intention. He reached for the tablet Arya had left on the table before retreating to the back room. Another upload had surfaced. A longer clip, clearer angle, audio intact. The algorithm didn't know what to do with it, but the audience did. The video showed a 2022 US afterparty where Taehyung wasn't performing, wasn't speaking to fans, wasn't doing idle things. He was standing beside Ray, laughing, real laughter, unfiltered, unmonetizable human, before the moment cut into distorted static. The chat didn't explode this time. It detonated. Taehyung didn't laugh now. He only watched the explosion of narratives cascade beneath the upload, understanding that anonymity had betrayed itself. The video was labeled innocently enough, but innocence is never what the world reads when a legend goes off script. The uploader was a ghost. The audience was a jury, and Taehyung was no longer willing to let ghosts write verdicts without testimony. Taehyung's voice crackled through the speaker of a replacement burner phone Arya now held, stepping into the living room archway, face carved out of a hurricane of unspoken loyalty and anger that felt earned. "You think shame makes you invisible," Taehyung said. "It only makes you predictable." The sentence was half accusation, half grief, entirely truth-shaped. Taehyung finally spoke, not loud, not rehearsed, not poetic, just honest in its fracture. Predictable people don't charter jets that never appear on flight logs. Taehyung froze, not because of the words but because of the intention beneath them. "So what now?" Jungkook asked from the corner, arms crossed, eyes tired from carrying other people's catastrophes. "Now we control the narrative," Taehyung answered, walking to the granite kitchen island like someone approaching a press center podium. voice iron enough to anchor a 1-hour broadcast. Not the story, the silence before it. Ray stepped into frame now, tablet in hand, uploading documents to journalists under an alias that smelled like revolution and strategy. "We send the uncut footage anonymously," she said. "Let the world react first. Let them demand answers. Then you step forward, not to clear your image but to control the second wave." "That's dangerous," Taehyung warned. "Silence is dangerous," Ray said simply. "We've seen what it does. It rots everything from the inside." Taehyung exhaled. "Then let's go nuclear carefully." The upload went live. Not clean, not soft, not cinematic, just raw. Within minutes, Hotel 23B trended worldwide. Fans thought he'd been kidnapped. Agencies thought he'd gone rogue. News anchors speculated. Legal analysts debated every frame like forensic priests reading scripture written in static and bloodshot vulnerability. Back in the silent Santa Fe house, Taehyung didn't blink. His voice finally came, low, steady, unshaken by noise. "I still have the full footage, uncut, including the audio." The room went still. "You mean the version where he confessed?" Taehyung asked. Taehyung nodded. "He confessed in the final seconds. He said it wasn't just me. Others were filmed, targeted, sold." Arya's breath froze in her lungs. "This goes deeper," she whispered. "It goes global," Taehyung said. "And global stories aren't won by hashtags. They're won by whoever controls the testimony before the jury gets bored." The room stayed quiet for a long time before Taehyung finally said it. "Then I'm flying with you. No more disappearing." And for the first time in years, Taehyung didn't feel invisible. He felt real. And real stories, unlike idols, don't vanish. They demand witnesses. And Taehyung was finally ready to let the world watch. Not the man who disappeared, but the man who returned holding the testimony they never expected him to still have. If narrative wars were fought in trenches, Taehyung was standing in one now, coat heavy, eyes steady, silence loaded like a weapon the world kept trying to steal from him. The second leak had changed everything. No longer a mystery about a flight, it was a global trial about identity, control, and what truth looks like when it bleeds through compression artifacts. The internet had already split into factions. Some fans defended him like scripture. Others questioned him like prosecutors who had never met shame, only consumed it. The desert house in Santa Fe didn't feel like refuge anymore. It felt like a staging ground. Taehyung still didn't sleep. He studied patterns, upload times, phrasing quirks, camera noise, grain consistency. Most people see pixels. Taehyung saw authorship. Someone wanted him exposed before he could testify. Someone who understood idol psychology well enough to know shame would keep him quiet. But they underestimated one thing: Taehyung didn't obey silence. He weaponized it. Jungkook scrolled on a second tablet now, reading global reactions aloud even though no one asked him to. "CNN's hinting that HYBE may face federal inquiries," he said. "TMZ already dug into flight charter irregularities. Fans are analyzing body language in the gallery clip like it's the Zapruder film of K-pop." Arya exhaled smoke, packing in jagged circles. "Public reaction at critical mass. First wave's emotional. Second wave will demand villains. Third wave will demand accountability." Taehyung didn't look up from the laptop. "Then we speak before the third wave writes a version that rots." Ray didn't nod. She didn't need to. She already uploaded the uncut file to a journalist under an alias tied to a whistleblower network bigger than entertainment gossip. The internet can bury a scandal. It can't bury a syndicate. The journalist pressed play in a secure room in New York, and the world finally heard the audio HYBE never wanted translated. Ian's voice in the clip was cold, deliberate, almost bored. "You're not the first idol we filmed, just the most exportable." Then a pause, like a man savoring leverage. "One of your bandmates was easier, quiet, terrified to scream." Taehyung's throat tightened hearing it again in memory, even though he'd never shown reaction in real time. The clip then showed the shove, not glamorous, not choreographed. Survival-shaped, tragic in impact but clear in intention. Then blackness. The journalist released the clip with a simple caption: "There is always another angle." And within minutes, global entertainment wasn't discussing his flight. They were discussing who filmed, who erased, who buried, who monetized trauma like a commodity, and who else was targeted under the same machinery. Taehyung arrived at dusk, stepping through the back door without knocking like someone who knew the address in his bones. He wore black, expression unreadable, eyes red from time zones or betrayal or loyalty. Taehyung wasn't sure anymore. "You want to go public?" Taehyung asked. "Yes," Taehyung answered. "Then you better say it out loud now," Taehyung said. "No metaphors, no poetry, just testimony." Taehyung stood, walking toward him slowly. "I pushed him. I didn't execute him, I survived him." Taehyung flinched not from the truth but from the weight beneath it. "Then we control the narrative together," Taehyung said. "Press conference, global broadcast. We expose the machinery, not the myth." Taehyung looked at him fully now. No mask, no beanie, no aesthetic buffer. "I still have the full footage," he said, "uncut, including the moment he named others." Taehyung's breath froze. "Then we don't just expose a scandal," Taehyung said. "We expose a network." "A syndicate," Jungkook corrected. "A global stage built on silence," Arya whispered. Taehyung exhaled, jacket heavy with USB memory, but eyes lighter than exile for the first time. "Then we walk into the light together," he said, "because I'd rather be interrogated for surviving than exported as a myth that obeyed silence." The plane tickets were booked again. 4 names. No aliases. One final corridor back into visibility, not to return to perfection, but to return holding testimony. And testimony, unlike idols, doesn't need choreography. It only needs witnesses who refuse to look away when the world finally demands the audio behind the pixels. The decision to go public had already hardened into inevitability, but inevitability doesn't mean simplicity. It means timing. And timing is where Taehyung has always played differently. Most celebrities drop statements like damage control. Taehyung was preparing to drop testimony like impact physics, not to defend a reputation, but to expose a mechanism that had benefited from the world's belief that legends are untouchable until they vanish. The journalists received the uncut footage first, because if the world was going to dissect the myth, it needed the scalpel sharpened before the crowd turned the dissection into entertainment. The file spread through encrypted editorial rooms from New York to Los Angeles, passing through fact-checking desks like classified evidence in a trial the public didn't know it had already entered. And when the verification marks came back greenlit, the world finally realized this wasn't gossip anymore. This was infrastructure. Fans were already camping outside galleries across the California coastline, treating art museums like pilgrimage checkpoints. News anchors were building character analyses instead of biographies. Entertainment outlets were asking the same question under different tones. Why would someone like Taehyung leave without announcing it first? The assumption had always been that idols flee noise. But Taehyung had fled silence, the kind that gets weaponized by people who prefer artists unseen and legends divided. In the desert house, Taehyung prepared talking points like someone drafting legal ammunition. Jungkook handled the analytics dashboard, watching engagement curves spike even without official confirmation of anything. Arya coordinated VPN routing for media drops, making sure his digital footprint looked like intention, not accident. And Ray, who started the leverage by crossing out her own name, now prepared to erase leverage itself by stepping into visibility as a witness instead of a shadow. Taehyung stood in the center of the room, palms flat against the kitchen island again. He could feel the next wave forming, not speculation, but accusation seeking direction. The world would want someone to blame, and people who want villains are allergic to nuance. But nuance was the entire point, because the real danger wasn't one man in Tokyo or one jet to America. It was a pattern of silence monetized into control, fear converted into footage, legends packaged into narratives convenient for systems that prefer mystery without accountability. The broadcast was scheduled for 8 p.m. Pacific Time, prime RPM window when attention peaks and retention decides revenue. Jungkook smirked at the irony. You disappeared quietly, but you'll return in the loudest time slot possible. Taehyung didn't smirk back, but the faint curve of a smile appeared anyway, micro, subtle, human. If they're going to analyze silence, he said, then I choose when silence ends. The cameras were set up, not glossy idle cameras. Real broadcast rigs, unfiltered lighting, unpolished honesty, lenses that don't blur imperfections into aesthetics. This wasn't about looking composed. This was about looking present. The world had always loved his aura. Tonight, it would have to meet the man. He rehearsed nothing, because he already memorized the truth long ago, in the same way idols memorize choreography. The difference is choreography hides uncertainty. Testimony doesn't get that luxury, and Taehyung had finally chosen not to hide behind either. The countdown began. No music, no intro narration, no poetic build-up, just a countdown the world could see, proving he was present before he spoke, because presence is the only credibility silence can't counterfeit. And when the timer hit 0, the world would finally learn that the most shocking part of his secret flight to America wasn't where he went. It was who else was filmed when the world thought legends only ever performed, never survived. The world had already reached the point where shock wasn't a reaction anymore. It was currency. But currency attracts counterfeiters, and Taehyung understood that better than anyone who had lived half his life being discussed in narratives he never fully authored. The difference now was clear. The world wasn't waiting for his aesthetic, it was waiting for his existence to prove itself. The broadcast rigs hummed softly, not dramatic, just mechanical, like a quiet reminder that truth has no soundtrack until humans project one onto it. Outside, California's coastline was still breathing fog, but online the atmosphere was electric, volatile, dangerous for anyone who didn't understand narrative packing. Good thing packing was Taehyung's silent specialty. The first global newsrooms to verify the uncut footage had already started contacting secondary sources from 2022, tracing Ray's alias back to the gallery circuit, connecting art investors to social elites, elites to private recordings, recordings to entertainment power structures. The public still thought this was a story about a secret trip. The industry already knew it was a story about a secret archive. Taehyung sat down for the first time that day, not out of fatigue but out of calculation. He didn't face the camera yet. He faced the table, elbows forward, fingers interlaced like someone bracing impact without flinching. It's a posture the world has seen before, but never like this. Not stylized, not rehearsed, not filtered through idle composure. This was a man sitting at the edge of a story he was finally willing to finish aloud. Jungkook refreshed the analytics dashboard again. Search volume is insane, he said. CTR on anything tied to your name is through the roof, even without official confirmation. People aren't clicking for answers. They're clicking to witness a moment they think might break. Let them witness, Taehyung said. Breaking is different from collapsing. Ray stood near the cameras now, arms crossed lightly, not defensive, just observant, like an artist who finally accepted being seen after years of preferring the shadows. "You're sure about this?" she asked quietly, the only appropriate question between witnesses. Taehyung didn't look at her, but he answered her anyway, because intention deserves clarity. "I flew to America quietly because the world is loud enough to bury nuance. But nuance is the only part that exposes patterns instead of scapegoats." Taehyung nodded from the back, expression firm, tired, loyal in its own unpolished way. "Then you speak for the people who couldn't scream in the footage." Taehyung finally looked up, not at Taehyung, not at Ray, not at the world outside. He looked at the lens, because lenses are where myths get manufactured. And this time the myth was about to meet its maker. The livestream comments were already forecasting emotional fracture. He's going to cry again. He's leaving BTS. He's exposing someone. He looks done. He looks betrayed. He looks different. They were right about one thing only. He looked different. Because this wasn't silence out of shame. This was silence out of ownership. And ownership always looks different when it ends without apology, without metaphor, without aesthetic fog. It ends with testimony. And Taehyung was seconds away from delivering the only version of himself the world had never been able to leak first. The version that didn't disappear from the story, but returned to narrate the moment the world never expected him to still have saved. By the time the broadcast link went live across global platforms, the narrative had already mutated from shock to suspense, from suspense to ownership, from ownership to an unshakable collective demand. Taehyung needed to speak before silence became a verdict again. The world had watched legends crack before, but it had never watched one return with evidence instead of explanation. Taehyung finally faced the camera. Not the polished idol posture fans had memorized, but a grounded presence shaped by agency, exhaustion, and something heavier, truth with witnesses waiting behind it. The lens captured him clearly now. No cinematic blur, no artistic shadows, no metaphorical armor. Just a man the world had mythologized finally sitting down to author the second half. The livestream chat didn't slow. It held its breath collectively, like millions of people inhaling before the same sentence. He didn't cry. He didn't smile theatrically either. He spoke with the quiet force of someone who knew that the loudest part of a story is the moment before it finally becomes human. "I didn't fly to America to hide," he began. "I flew here to end a narrative that was being written without witnesses." His voice was calm, textured, unfiltered. The world keeps assuming silence means shame, but shame is what systems want from people who hold uncut footage. Behind the camera rigs, Jungkook monitored engagement curves that looked more like seismic readings than analytics. Taehyung leaned against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight, not defensive but bracing accountability. Ray stood motionless, tablet still glowing faintly from the final upload that had erased leverage and birthed testimony. Taehyung continued, words measured but loaded. "When the second clip leaked, you all stopped asking where I went. You started asking who else was recorded when legends were supposed to just perform." The chat rippled. The internet was shifting again, but this time toward villains, infrastructure, patterns, not myth. "You deserve the full version," he said, "not the fragments designed to corner intention." He exhaled once. "Yes, I still have the uncut file, including the part where names were spoken in fear, not PR." Arya's lighter clicked softly in the background, the only sound that felt accidental enough to be real. The desert night outside was now irrelevant. This room had become the world's courtroom. "And no," Taehyung added, "this isn't about leaving BTS. This is about returning to the story before silence gets exported as consent." The internet detonated again, but differently. Not panic, recognition, retention. A collective understanding that Taehyung hadn't fled America or Tokyo or the world. He had fled the first narrative. He leaned forward slightly now, eyes steady, tone low, honest. "The real shock wasn't the place I visited in America," he said. "It was that the world didn't expect me to come back holding the audio first." The chat erupted, not divided this time, but galvanized. Because Taehyung had finally done what the world thought legends never do. He returned, not to fix the myth, but to finish the human half of it, testimony in hand, witnesses behind him, and a story that could no longer be leaked before it was spoken aloud by the only voice that had earned the right to end the silence first. When Taehyung said that final line, the world didn't just react, it recalibrated. The narrative shifted like a compass snapping back to magnetic north. It wasn't a press statement that changed the atmosphere. It was the fact that he delivered it without asking for sympathy, without cushioning it in poetic ambiguity. Sympathy is emotional. Agency is unforgettable. And unforgettable is what feeds retention. News outlets now scrambled to reframe. Analysts stopped diagnosing and started decoding. Fans stopped defending and started witnessing. Because the moment a legend admits control instead of chaos, the story graduates from spectacle into evidence-shaped mythology. Taehyung continued speaking into the lens with a cadence built for a 1-hour audience. Some stories are louder when they're delivered without soundtrack. That's why I flew quietly. The chat surged again, hanging on every syllable like this wasn't a K-pop confession, but a global character reassembly. I didn't want silence to be interpreted. I wanted silence to be noticed first. Taehyung stepped slightly closer behind the camera rigs, visible only to the room, not the audience. His presence was quiet support, the kind that doesn't interrupt testimony but strengthens posture. Jungkook muttered from the corner, "SEO doesn't win wars, suspense does." Ray didn't speak. She observed. Observation is how artists fact-check humans. Taehyung leaned back a fraction, gaze steady but reflective. "The gallery wasn't a destination," he said. "It was a checkpoint." The world braced again, because checkpoints imply patterns, and patterns imply systems, and systems imply culpability. The portrait wasn't crossed out because someone wanted to erase the artist. It was crossed out because someone wanted to erase the subject before the subject could speak. Arya exhaled sharply, smoke trailing upward like punctuation the story didn't need but the room understood. "You're giving them the architecture," she whispered. "Good," Taehyung replied quietly, but his eyes never left the lens. Architecture is harder to spin than emotion. The world didn't know Ray's face yet, but they knew her work now. The internet had turned her anonymity into obsession. Who paints Taehyung honestly? Who crosses out signatures? Who leaks angles without claiming credit? The question wasn't about her identity anymore. It was about the intention of her erasure. "And intention," Taehyung said, voice dropping into a near whisper that carried like thunder because the world had been leaning forward for 40 minutes already, "is the one thing silence can't counterfeit." Another wave hit, but not panic, recognition, retention, because the audience wasn't watching a man explain a secret flight to America anymore. They were watching a man expose the scaffolding that had once turned his own silence into narrative merchandise. And the longer Taehyung held eye contact with the lens, the clearer it became to the world that the real shock was never the destination in America. It was that the destination had been chosen by a man who knew exactly how silence gets weaponized, exported, misinterpreted, and how to end it before the machinery could upload the myth first.